The homework was about river systems. Nadia had been staring at the same paragraph for 20 minutes. She was not a bad student. She was just tired, and the recycled air on the steadfast always made her head feel heavy after dinner. The ship's small library had 2 chairs, 1 broken shelf, and a viewport the size of a dinner tray. She liked it because nobody else ever came here. She looked up from her paper. Not because of a sound, because of the absence of one. The hum of the engines had changed. Lower, slower. The kind of change that meant the bridge crew had their hands on manual controls. She looked out the viewport. The stars were gone. Not dark, not cloudy. Gone, replaced by shapes. Long, angular shapes with dull running lights that blinked in slow patterns. She pressed her nose to the glass and counted. 1, 5, 12. She stopped counting at 30 because more kept appearing from behind the larger ones. Ships, each one bigger than anything humanity had built so far. The library door burst open. Her father stood in the frame, still holding his reading glasses in one hand, jacket half on. Rowan Osei was a man who was calm in most situations. He was not calm now. Nadia, I need you to go to your bunk room. Lock it from the inside. She pointed at the viewport. What are those? He looked. Something moved behind his eyes. Not quite fear, something older than fear. Recognition, maybe. Go to your bunk. Please. Dad, Nadia. She went to her bunk. She waited 45 seconds. Then she followed him to the bridge. Nobody stopped her. The corridor was full of crew members moving fast and quiet, which meant it was serious. When things were not serious, people talked. When they just moved. The bridge of the Steadfast was not a large room. 8 stations, 2 large screens, and a viewport that wrapped around the front like a curved eye. Every station was full. Commander Dara Holt stood at the center with her arms crossed and her jaw set like she was holding something inside her mouth that she did not want to say. The screen showed numbers. Range, mass estimates, power readings. The numbers were not good. Nadia was 14, not a soldier, but she had grown up on this ship and she knew what bad numbers looked like. She stood in the back corner near the door and did not speak. Her father reached the front and said something quietly to Holt. Holt shook her head once. He said something else. She shook her head again, slower this time. That meant the second thing he suggested was even less useful than the first. Then the main screen changed. The numbers disappeared. A face filled the screen. It was not a human face. It was broad and angular, covered in gray-blue scales that caught the light like wet stone. The eyes were gold with narrow, vertical pupils. The mouth was a flat line. There was no visible emotion on the face. That, Nadia thought, was the most frightening part. Not anger, not hatred, just the expression of something that had done this before and found it routine. The voice that came out was deep and translated by the ship's system in a flat, even words. I am Commander Vorn of the Vrethkai Dominion. You're the species called human. I will not insult you with a long speech. I will tell you only what I have done before. He listed 7 species. He named each one. He said what they had been before the Dominion arrived, their populations, their worlds, their technologies. Then he said what they were after. The numbers went in one direction. Down. In some cases, to 0. He did not sound proud. He did not sound sorry. He sounded like someone reading a list of finished tasks. When he was done, he said, You have 6 hours. In 6 hours, I want your ships disarmed, your weapons transferred to my fleet, and your leadership aboard my vessel. If this does not happen, I will begin. The screen went back to numbers. Nobody on the bridge spoke. Holt turned and looked at the viewport. Nadia followed her gaze. More ships had appeared while the transmission was playing. They filled the space between the Steadfast and the sun like a slow-moving wall. Ambassador Osei turned around. He saw Nadia standing in the corner. He did not tell her to leave. He just looked at her with the face of a man who had run out of options and knew it. Holt spoke first. If every combat vessel we have in the solar system came right now, we'd still be at about 10 to 1 against us. Maybe worse. Osei nodded. I know. That's not a fight. That's a list. He nodded again. Point one of the junior crew at the far station made a small sound. Not words. Just the sound a person makes when they're trying to keep something inside. Nadia looked back at the viewport. The ships were not moving. They were just there, the way a wall is just there, without threat, without mercy, simply present. She thought about the voice. The list of species. The total lack of anything in that face that suggested he expected a real answer. She thought, he does not think we are going to surprise him. She did not say this out loud. Nobody was asking her. She was 14, in a school uniform, and she had a page of homework in her hand about river systems on a planet that might not matter anymore. She folded the homework carefully and put it in her pocket. 6 hours. The Steadfast had a small meeting room behind the bridge with a folding table and 6 chairs that did not all match. That was where the serious conversations happened. Nadia sat on the floor outside the closed door and listened. She could not hear every word. She heard enough. Holt's voice was steady and precise. The way it got when she was delivering information she did not like. Jose's voice was quieter. The voices of the others cut in and out. At one point, Holt said, "It's not a military question anymore." At another point, someone said the word surrender, and the room went quiet for a moment before the voices started again. Nadia stood up and went to the library. She pulled books. Not the ones about diplomacy or military history or alien linguistics. Her father had those covered. She pulled the one she had read for herself. Old collections. Folklore from 20 different countries. A book of speeches. A thin volume about animal behavior that she had found in a cargo box when she was 10 and had never given back. She sat on the floor between the shelves and read. Not slowly. She moved through pages fast, not reading every word, looking for something she could not fully name yet. A pattern, a shape, the speeches first. She had read most of them before. What struck her this time was not the famous lines. It was the moments before the famous lines. The pauses. The descriptions from people who were in the room. Again and again, the thing that made a speech matter was not the word chosen. It was the fact that the speaker was genuinely asking something. Not performing, not demanding, asking. She put the speech book down and opened the animal behavior one. There was a chapter about threat displays. About how many animals, when facing something bigger, try to make themselves look larger, louder, more dangerous than they were. And how that worked sometimes against things that could be frightened. But against something that could not be frightened, it did nothing. Against something that had already decided, it did less than nothing. She chewed her thumbnail and thought. Then she opened the folklore book. There was a story she half remembered about a girl who had been brought before a king who had already decided to burn her village. Every advisor had argued with numbers, population, tax value, military use. The king had not listened. The girl had asked him one question. The story did not explain why the question worked. It just said the king sat down, and the village was still there the next morning. Nadia had always found that unsatisfying as a child. What was the question? The story never said. She thought about it differently now. Maybe it did not matter what the question was. Maybe what mattered was that it was a real question. Not a trick, not a disguised argument. An actual thing she wanted to know. And the king, who had heard 1,000 arguments and none of them had cost him anything, suddenly had to actually think. She picked up her notepad and wrote something. She looked at it for a long time. She crossed it out. The problem was it sounded like a challenge. If it sounded like a challenge, he would answer it like soldier. She needed something that didn't have a soldier's answer. She wrote it again differently, still not right. Too clever. It would sound like a trick. She tore the page off, crumpled it, and stared at the blank page. What did she actually want to know? She thought about the face on the screen. Not the words. The face. The total absence of anything that looked like anticipation. He had listed 7 species like a man reading a grocery list. He was not curious about the outcome. He already knew the outcome, and that, right there, was the thing that did not sit right. If he already knew the outcome, why was he here? Commanders like that had people for this. They had fleet captains and junior officers and whole chains of authority designed so that they did not have to come themselves. He could have sent a signal and waited. Instead, he was here, in person, in the ship at the front of the formation. Why? She wrote the question down. Simple. The way she would actually say it to someone she was genuinely curious about. She looked at IT. IT was not a threat. It was not a plea. It did not have a soldier's answer. She read it twice more, then folded the notepad and held it in both hands. Back in the meeting room, the voices had stopped. That was worse than the arguing. That was the sound of people who had finished deciding. She stood up, put the books back on the shelf in the wrong order. She would fix it later, she told herself, and walked toward the bridge. She did not have a plan. She had one sentence and the belief, based on a story where the actual question was never recorded, that sometimes one honest question was worth more than any argument at IT was not much. She walked faster. Her father's hand was on the transmit key. Nadia saw it from across the bridge. The posture of a man who had made a decision he did not like and was about to live with it. His shoulders were down. His head was slightly forward. The surrender message was on the screen in front of him. 3 short paragraphs, each one more careful than the last. She crossed the bridge in 8 steps. Wait. He turned. The crew turned. Holt, standing 2 stations away, looked at her with an expression that was not unkind, but was very firm. Nadia. Her father's voice was gentle. Go back to, I want to talk to him first. Holt said no. Nadia looked at her. Not with defiance. Just directly. Why not? Because you're a child, and this is a first contact military situation. It stopped being a military situation when you said 10 to 1. She turned back to her father. What does it cost to let me try first? If it goes wrong, you send a message after. Nothing changes. Osei looked at her. Then he looked at the message on the screen. Then back at her. Holt said, Ambassador. He held up one hand. He was still looking at his daughter. What are you going to say? Nadia held up the notepad. 1 sentence. 1 sentence. Yes. Holt made a sound that was not quite a word. Osei reached out and opened the channel. The screen changed. The gold eyes and gray-blue scales filled the frame. Vorn. He looked at Osei. Then his eyes moved slightly to the right and found Nadia, and for one small moment, less than a second, something in his face shifted. Not surprise exactly. More like the expression of a person who reaches into a box expecting one thing and finds a completely different thing. He did not close the channel. Nadia stepped forward until she was clearly visible in the frame. She kept her hands in front of her, the notepad in both hands, the way she held things when she was nervous but did not want to look it. My name is Nadia Osei. I am 14 years old and in my 3rd year of secondary school. My father is Ambassador Rowan Osei. I'm not a diplomat or a soldier. She paused. May I read you something? She did not wait for an answer. Her voice was steady. If you already know we will lose, then why did you come here to watch it happen in person? She lowered the notepad. The bridge of the Steadfast was completely silent. Nobody breathed too loudly. On the screen, Vorn had not moved. His face was the same controlled, flat expression as before. But his eyes had changed. Something was working behind them. Not anger, not amusement. Something slower and more difficult to name. 0.4 seconds passed. 5. Behind him on his bridge, Nadia could see movement. Other Vrethkai, all of them large, all of them still, watching the screen the way people watch something they do not fully understand but cannot look away from. One of them, standing near the back, older with darker scales and a slight curve to his posture that looked like age, had tilted his head. Vorn's mouth opened slightly. Closed. He cut the channel. The screen went back to numbers. Holt exhaled. Well, that happened. Nobody laughed. Osei was looking at the blank screen. His hand had come off the transmit key. He had not sent the message. Nadia was not sure he had noticed. What do we do now? One of the junior crew asked. Nobody answered right away. Nadia looked at the viewport. The fleet had not moved. The ships were still there, still filling the space between the Steadfast and the sun, still enormous and still and completely silent. But the channel had stayed open for 9 seconds after a question. She had counted that a commander who had already decided things did not stay on a channel for 9 seconds. A commander who had already decided things closed the channel after 1 second, maybe 2. You only stayed if something was still processing. She did not say this out loud. She went to the corner near the door and sat on the floor with her back against the wall and her notepad on her knees. Her father looked at her from across the room. What made you ask that? He said, quietly, not angry, genuinely asking. She thought about it. He listed those species like they were finished, like he already knew this story. So I wanted to know why someone who already knows the ending would bother showing up for it. Osei was quiet for a moment. Holt pulled up a secondary screen showing the fleet's energy readings. She stared at it. Then she said, in the tone of someone reporting something they did not expect, "Their weapons arrays just dropped to standby." Everyone turned. "Not powered down," she said. "Standby. That's different." Different was not safe. Different was not solved. But different was not the same as before either. Nadia wrote something on her notepad. Not a sentence this time. Just a word, to remind herself of something. The word was waiting. Aboard the Iron Silence, the flagship of the Vrethkai fleet, a corridor light had been flickering for 3 days. Nobody had fixed it because nobody had time, and also because Vorn had been in a mood and everyone on the ship could feel it the way you feel a change in air pressure before a storm. He was in his private chamber now, standing with his back to the door, looking at the surface of a strategy table that was currently blank because he had closed every map and projection and just stood there. Sura waited near the entrance. She had been his second-in-command for 6 years. She knew when to speak and when to stand still. This was a standing still moment. It was a trick, Vorn said. Not to her. To the room. She did not agree or disagree. They put the child on the channel to confuse the moment. To buy time. It's a tactic. Yes, Sura said carefully. Possibly. He turned. His gold eyes found her. You don't think it was a tactic? She had learned not to lie to him. It never helped. I think it might have been both. A tactic and also a real question. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked away. The door opened behind Sura without a knock. She stepped aside. Grail came in. Grail was the oldest living member of the Vrethkai fleet by a significant number of years. His scales had gone from dark gray to almost white at the edges. He walked with a slight lean and had long ago stopped pretending he needed permission to enter rooms. Vorn looked at him. I didn't ask for you. No, Grail agreed. He moved to the table and rested both hands on it. I heard the transmission. All of it. And I wanted to ask you something. Grail's voice was slow and very even. In all the conquests you have led, and all the ones I have recorded, do you know how many species responded to a first communication by asking us a question? Vorn said nothing. None, Grail said. They beg, they threaten, they argue numbers, they pray to things we can't see. Not one of them has ever simply asked us a question. He paused. Until today. Until a child with a notepad. It changes nothing about the tactical reality. No, Grail said. It doesn't. He turned his head and looked at the blank table. Do you want to know what it does change? Vorn did not answer. Grail took that as a yes. Every species we've broken had one thing working against them. They all believed that survival was the only goal. So they measured everything in survival terms. Numbers, weapons, time. The child did not do that. She was not measuring survival. She was measuring something else. Sura said quietly, she was just curious. Grail looked at her. Yes, exactly that. He turned back to Vorn. She was genuinely curious about you. Not afraid of you. Curious about you. Do you understand how rare that is? She's 14. Yes. Which means she hasn't had enough time to learn to be afraid in the way adults learn it. He straightened slowly. I'm not saying don't conquer them. I'm saying you should know what you're looking at before you finish. Because I have been recording wars for a long time, and I have never, not once, recorded this. He left without being dismissed. The door closed. The flickering corridor light flashed once through the gap before it shut. Vorn stood with his hands flat on the table for a while. Then he said, extend the window. No action for another 3 hours. Sura looked at him. The reason I give the fleet. Tell them the assessment is still ongoing. She nodded. And Sura. He did not look up. If the humans open the channel again, don't wait for me. Answer it. She left. Back in the steadfast, the crew had been watching the fleet's energy readings for 2 hours. Holt had put the surrender message in a queue, but had not sent it. Nobody had told her to send it. Nobody had told her not to. So she waited. Nadia had fallen asleep on the floor in the corner of the bridge. Someone had put a folded jacket under her head at some point. She woke up when she heard one of the crew say the weapons were still on standby and 3 hours had been added to the window. She sat up. Her notepad was still on her knees. Her father was at his station, awake, looking older than he had that morning. She stood, crossed to him, and said quietly, open the channel again. He looked at her. Nadia, something is happening on their side. Someone thought about it. If we wait, we lose the moment. She held up the notepad. I have more to say. He studied her face for a long time. Then he opened the channel. The screen filled, but not with Vorn's face. Sura looked back at them. She was younger than Nadia had expected. She looked at Nadia directly, the way someone looks when they have been waiting for a specific person. She said, "He wants to know what you meant." Nadia did not spend the hour preparing. She ate a granola bar she found in her jacket pocket. It was slightly crushed and tasted like cardboard with a memory of peanut butter. She ate the whole thing and stared at the ceiling of the bridge. Some of the crew watched her. She could feel it. They were waiting for her to do something purposeful. Take notes, practice words, pace around. She did not do any of those things. Her father sat nearby. He had stopped trying to figure out what she was doing and had started just being near her, which was more useful. Holt spent the hour on her secondary screens. At one point, she looked up and said to no one in particular, "They still haven't moved. Not one ship." Nobody responded because there was nothing to add. 20 minutes before the hour ended. A junior crew member named Bryn, who was usually in charge of communication logs and was very quiet, walked over and handed Nadia a small chocolate from somewhere in her own jacket. She didn't say anything, just held it out and walked away. Nadia ate it. When the hour was up, she stood. She straightened her school uniform, which had gotten wrinkled from sitting on the floor. She pulled the collar straight. She did not look at her notepad. She walked to the center of the bridge and nodded at her father. He opened the channel. All three of them were there this time. Vorn in the center, large and still. Sura to his left. Grail to his right, leaning slightly forward, and behind them, the rest of the bridge. At least 30 Vrethkai, all sizes, all still. All watching the screen. Nadia looked at Vorn. "I've been thinking about what is worth remembering," she said. "And I kept trying to come up with something smart or something official sounding. But I'm not a diplomat. I'm in secondary school, so I'm going to say the thing that is actually true." She paused, not for effect, because she wanted to make sure she got it right. "I am 14 years old. I have not done anything important yet. I have not built anything or led anyone or fixed any of the problems my planet still has. There are a lot of those." She looked at him steadily. "But I know that every single person on every ship in this fleet was also 14 once. Before they became soldiers or commanders or whatever they are now. Before they learned what was expected of them." Vorn's face was still, but he was not looking past her. He was looking at her. "You came here because your Dominion decided humanity's trajectory is dangerous. And maybe you're right. We are not always good. We fight each other. We've broken things that mattered. We're hard to predict and hard to organize, and we change our minds too often." She took one breath. "But we are not done. That's what I told your historian. We are not good at being done. Every time we fail at something, some of us go back and try again differently. Not because someone ordered it, because we actually want to get it right. That doesn't make us special. It makes us still in progress." She looked at Vorn directly. "You did not come here to watch us lose. I still believe that. I think you came here because somewhere underneath all the assessments and the trajectory reports, someone wanted to know if we were worth anything. Not as a military threat. As a species." She let that sit. "We are. Not because we're strong. Because we're still trying to figure out how to be." The bridge of the iron silence was completely silent. Grail had straightened up. He was not leaning anymore. He had a look on his face that was hard to read, but was not neutral. It was the expression of someone watching something be added to a record that will outlast them. Sura was looking at her hands. Vorn closed his eyes, but he opened them. He said something in Vrethkai, not translated, to someone off-screen. Short. 2 words, maybe 3. A pause. Then whoever he said it to responded, and he said it again, louder, more clearly. And this time Nadia heard the response echo. Other voices repeating it further away and further, like a signal moving down a ship, and then further from ship to ship. Vorn looked at the screen. "You are granted a review period," he said. "This is not a term we have used before. It means we are watching, not concluding. Your species will not be acted upon while the period is active." Osei stepped forward slightly. "How long?" "Long enough." Vorn looked at Nadia again for a moment. "Just a moment. Go back to your schoolwork." The channel closed. The Steadfast was silent for 1 full second. Then Holt said, very flatly, Their formation is breaking. A pause. They're rotating out of attack posture. Another pause. All of them. Someone made a sound. Several people made sounds. Osei sat down in the nearest chair because his legs had apparently made a decision without him. Bryn put her face in her hands and made a sound that was not crying but was close to its neighbor. Nadia looked at the viewport. The ships were still there. The fleet had not gone anywhere. But the long angular shapes had shifted. They were no longer pointed at the steadfast or at Earth. They were just there, present in the way background things are present. The way clouds are still in the sky after a storm, and you can see them, but you're no longer measuring them. Between the ships, the stars were visible again. Her father put his hand on her shoulder. She leaned against him for a moment. She thought about the girl in the folklore story. The one who had asked the king a question and saved a village, and whose question was never recorded. She understood now why it was never recorded. It did not matter what the question was. What mattered was that it was real. She put the notepad back in her pocket. She still had homework about river systems. It was probably still due. She wanted to go finish it. Nadia had once given a presentation in school about water purification that had gone so badly the teacher had stopped her halfway through and asked if she was feeling well. She had been fine. She had just been nervous. She was more nervous now than she had been then. The difference was that she could not let it show the same way. So she stood straight and breathed through her nose and looked at Sura's face on the screen and thought, she is also nervous. Look at the way she is holding her hands. That helped. I meant exactly what I said. Nadia started. I wasn't trying to trick him. I really wanted to know. Sura was quiet for a moment. Then, why does it matter to you why he came? Because he listed all those species like they were already done. Like it was settled. If it's settled, you send someone else. You come yourself when you think there's a chance something unexpected might happen. She paused. I wanted to know if he thought we were unexpected. On the Vrethkai bridge, something moved slightly in Sura's face. And if he did, then it seemed worth talking to him. Another pause. Longer. Sura looked sideways at something off-screen. Then back. I will tell you something honestly, Sura said. I have followed orders on 11 conquests. I was not allowed to ask whether the species was worth knowing first. We just arrived. Nadia looked at her carefully. Did you want to ask? Sura said nothing, which was an answer. That counts, Nadia said. Wanted to ask, even if you didn't? That counts. Behind Nadia, she heard Holt make a quiet sound, but not speak. The conversation went differently after that. Not like a negotiation, not like a standoff. More like two people who had ended up at the same crossing from different directions and were both surprised to see someone else there. Sura explained how the Dominion worked. Nadia had known some of it from her father's briefings, but hearing it from the inside was different. Species were assessed by a committee before contact. The assessment had 3 outcomes: ignore, observe, or remove. Humanity had come up as remove, not because of strength, because of trajectory. The Dominion did not like where humanity was heading. Who decides the trajectory? Nadia asked. Senior Command. It has always been that way. Has anyone ever disagreed with a trajectory assessment? Sura was quiet for a moment. Not formally, but informally. Longer pause. Yes, Sura said. Some have. What happened to them? Nothing. Because they never said it out loud. Nadia nodded slowly. She understood that. They talked for 40 minutes. The bridge crew of the Steadfast had mostly stopped pretending to work and were just listening. Holt stood with her arms crossed, but the arms had lowered from her chest to somewhere around her stomach, which was progress. Then Grail appeared in the frame. He moved like someone who did not need to ask permission to enter a conversation either. He leaned in from the side of the screen and looked at Nadia the way an old librarian looks at a student who has found an unexpected book. What does humanity intend to do? He said. If it is given time. Nadia considered the question seriously. It deserved that. I don't know exactly, she said. We're pretty bad at predicting ourselves. Estimate. She thought. We would probably argue about it for a long time. We'd try some things that don't work. We'd hurt some people by accident and hopefully fix it later. We'd build some things that turn out useful and break some things that turn out important. And then eventually we'd get something mostly right. She paused. That's sort of what we do. We're not good at being done. We keep going back and trying again. Grail stared at her. Then he laughed. IT was not a polite laugh or a short one. It was the laugh of someone who had not expected to laugh and did not fully know what to do with it. Sura turned and looked at him like she had never seen him do that before. "Write that down," he said to someone off-screen. "All of it." Nadia heard something from the edge of the frame. A voice she recognized. Vorn. She could not see him, but he was there, and he was listening, and he had been listening for a while. She looked directly at where his voice had come from. "Commander Vorn," she said clearly. "You don't have to come on screen. But I think you've been there for most of this conversation, and I think you've been listening carefully, and I think that means something." Silence. Holt looked at Osei. Osei looked at the screen. Then Holt said, very quietly, with the tone of a person reporting something they were not entirely ready to believe, "Weapons arrays just went from standby to full power down." Not standby. Not aimed. Off. That Sura's eyes moved. She had heard it too, through some internal system. Nadia kept looking at the edge of the frame. "You're almost out of time," Vorn's voice said. "Still off-screen. Come back in 1 hour. Say something worth remembering." The channel closed. The bridge was quiet for a long moment. Then someone near the back of the room started laughing. Not at anything, just the release of it. And someone else said stop it, but they were almost laughing too. Nadia sat down on the floor and breathed. Her father crouched next to her. He did not say anything. He put one hand on her shoulder and left it there. 1 hour.